change. The facts on the ground demand change. The Congress has passed legislation to require change. It is time to sunset the authorization for the war in Iraq.
That was Senator Hillary Clinton this week announcing her new plan to try to end the president's power to wage war in Iraq. And we're back now with Britt, Mara, Bill, and Juan. Well, it's not a new idea, but it is a big change for Hillary Clinton, who has previously rejected timetables for withdrawal and now supports this idea of rescinding the original authorization to use force. Mara, will this get her past her troubles with the left wing for refusing to apologize for that 2002 vote?
It might help her. I think the big question for Senator Clinton is that she has been doing a very careful balancing act in the primary, thinking about the general election, leaving herself some kind of running room to move to the center. I question more about what it'll do to that effort. I think this probably will help her with whatever problems she has on the left. She said after that speech, she said that it would mean that the troops would be out as of October. She said they have no authority to continue. That's the point. That's a pretty short-term, definite endpoint, which is, I thought, what she'd always shied away from in the past, saying she just wanted a goal, she wanted a very phased withdrawal, she wanted to leave troops there to fight al-Qaeda. This would be pretty blanket if the president has no authority.
I think her staff amended that to say that she would then authorize some limited role.
Right, then she would authorize some limited role, but still, I think the message that for people who are listening to her, as opposed to her staff, it sounds like she wants this war ended quite quickly, which I think is movement on her part.
Britt, there really does seem to be a race to the left among, I mean, I hate to take the phrase of John Boehner, but he's right. There is a race to the left by all the Democratic candidates to try to show, no, I'm tougher against the war than you are.
Listen, the vote to authorize a war in Iraq is the original sin of this Democratic primary election. And Hillary Clinton is guilty of it and therefore needs to do something to atone for it. And she's tried various things short of saying she regrets her original vote. This is one more step. It is all about positioning herself. It is really not a serious legislative effort. I don't think there's any evidence that this thing could ever, if it passed, survive a veto. But let's remember, Democratic voters have been willing to forgive Clintons of sin in the past and might again this time.
Britt's more good-humored about this, I must say, than I am. It is so irresponsible when 160,000 troops are fighting in a war and the head of al-Qaeda says, we're going to drive you out, to stand up on the floor of the Senate, and really for patently short-term political reasons. I mean, this is not a serious proposal by Senator Clinton. To say, whoops, it's a mistake, we want to de-over, let's de-authorize the war that soldiers are fighting and dying in right now. I mean, it's pathetic. If she thinks we should get out, she should propose a serious plan to get out in 30 days or 60 days, not give al-Qaeda a symbolic victory. And that's what Senator Clinton's proposal would do. And did last week.
And she's the only one involved in political posturing on the war?
Yes. The Republicans, as you just said, against the polls, the Republicans are standing for fighting and winning. It's against the public opinion polls.
What you see coming from Republicans on the war, I think, is a refusal to deal with the realities, simply to say, oh no, we have got to stay there and support our president despite the realities on the ground. That's political power. I agree Hillary Clinton's involved in political posturing because, just as Britt said, this has no chance. This is all about her presidential campaign. But when you look at what the Republicans are saying, they are absolutely closing their eyes and pretending that there's not a civil war taking place there. They're all talking about, oh no, this is actually all about al-Qaeda, when the realities stare them and defy their...
The reality on the ground now, and for some weeks, has been that the internecine, the sectarian violence has subsided rather remarkably. Not completely, but to a great extent. And the big noises that are being made over there and these horrible attacks are, to the best of all the knowledge we have, al-Qaeda generated. We are, whether we want to admit it or not, at war with al-Qaeda in Iraq. That's not all there is to it, but that's the major factor now.
Britt, let me in fact play a clip of President Bush, who this week was making just that argument. Here it is.
For America, the decision we face in Iraq is not whether we ought to take sides in the Civil War. It's whether we stay in the fight against the same international terrorist network that attacked us on 9/11.
Mara, let me ask you about that. Do you think, as you read it and study it, obviously you're not on the front lines over there, is this no longer or less a civil war and more a fight against al-Qaeda?
I think it's both. I mean, the last national intelligence estimate said it's extremely complicated. There's a civil war. There's Shiite versus Shiite. There's also the presence of al-Qaeda. They might not have been there before, the war started, but they certainly are there now. So it's very, very complicated. I do think, though, in terms of the politics you're seeing on both sides, Republicans and Democrats, you've got the bases of both parties so hardened. I mean, when NPR is coming out with a new poll this week that shows this, I mean, the Republican base is extremely supportive of this. The Democratic base is extremely opposed, and I think that's what you're seeing. That
Which
both sides
explains
are
why
being
John
pushed.
McCain is not heard supporting the troop surge when he runs for the
that's
Republican
why
nomination.
I think that Senator Clinton is doing what makes perfect sense, you know, in terms of the primary politics. And it just remains to be seen how much flexibility she can leave herself.
Bill, where do we end up in this compromise? I mean, you heard Boehner talking about Boehner benchmarks, demands for a clean bill. There's some Democrats who are saying, now Dodd didn't, but some Democrats are saying they won't support a bill that doesn't force the troops to start to come out. Is there going to be a bill that ends up getting signed by the end of this month?
Yeah, I think there will be, either by the end of this month or early in June, with some soft benchmarks, so to speak, no timetables for withdrawal. And I think the real fight is after Labor Day. The real fight is on next year's appropriations, and that will be a real fight. But there, the Democrats are going to try to force us to get out of Iraq.
And the question is, since you're putting in benchmarks, as they say, with no teeth, then what is the consequence? Well, people talk about removing some foreign aid. I think in part what the Democrats' saving face here is going to be is don't fund it more than through July or August. You know, just have a short term so that the president has to come back and revisit these issues about whether or not there's progress being made. The president wants to put it in terms of General Petraeus's voice. He wants to put it in terms of the Democrats versus the troops. For the Democrats, the political posturing, here we go again, the Democrats have to say, no, there's a reality on the ground. April was the deadliest month in terms of Americans being killed since last year. We're still seeing this. Let's look at a real way to withdraw American forces from the midst of this sectarian violence and put them in a position that would allow them to fight al-Qaeda and truly fight terrorism.
Juan, did you really think that when more troops were added to Baghdad, out on patrol and doing more work and fighting, that there would be fewer casualties?
I would hope that, I mean, that's why we're building walls, I think. That's why we thought that we could try to limit the violence inside Baghdad. We were told that was the key.
Sometimes you have to fight to do that.
Well, yeah, but at some point you have to have some result. And now we're saying, oh, the result doesn't have to come till the fall. Oh, the result doesn't have to come for 2 or 3 years. How long?
I'll tell you what, this conversation is over. Thank you, panel. See